Well, good morning, grandchildren. It's Grandpa again, and I apologize. I didn't know that I had used up all the memory in my battery or in my storage on my phone yesterday, and so the end of our story, the end of chapter 10, got cut off just a little bit. So I'm going to finish chapter 10 for you and read chapter 11 today. So if you remember, they were having a great party to celebrate 2 months of Chester's being in New York, and they're at the Bellini's newsstand. And they were having quite a party at the time that we left off, but accidentally, Tucker Mouse had tripped over some matches and spilled them on the floor, and they struck because these were the old-time matches that would light anywhere, and got a fire going in the newsstand. And here's a picture of Tucker Mouse and Harry Cat, and Chester's up there on the top on the shelf, and they're trying to get the stuff pulled away from the fire, but they just couldn't get it done. So that's where we are. "Oh, fine," said Tucker. "She's still burning, and you blocked the only hole to get out." They were trapped. Harry and Tucker jumped down and started pulling away the magazines furiously, but the fire kept getting closer and closer, and they had to back away. "Way to go," said Tucker. "I should have." What a way to go," said Tucker. "I should have stayed on 10th Avenue. For a moment, Chester got panicky, but he forced his thoughts back into order and took stock of the whole situation. An idea struck him. In one leap, he jumped onto the alarm clock, landing right on the button that set off the alarm. The old clock began to ring so wildly it shook itself around and around on the shelf in a mad dance. Chester hopped back to his friends. "Any alarm in a fire," he said. "Any alarm." They waited. They crouched against the wall. On the opposite side of the stand, the flames were leaping against the wood, and the paint on the wood had already begun to blister. It seemed there was no hope. Chester could hear voices outside the newsstand, however. Even in this hour, there were always a few people in the station. Somebody said, "What's that?" "I smell smoke," said another. Chester recognized that voice. It was Paul, the conductor of the shuttle. There was a sound of footsteps running away, then the sound of the footsteps as they ran back again, and the hammering began, and the newsstand was shaking all over. "Somebody get the other side," said Paul. The cover was wrenched off, and clouds of smoke billowed up. The people standing around were astonished to see, through the fumes and the glare of the fire, a cat, a mouse, and a cricket running and jumping to safety. That's the end of chapter 10. From the drain pipe, the animals watched Paul put out the fire. He dragged what papers he could out of the newsstands and got a bucket of water to douse the rest. He watered down the walls to make sure that they wouldn't flare up later. When the danger was over, he called up Papa Bellini on the telephone. "What a mess," said Tucker Mouse, looking at the soggy, smoldering piles of papers and magazines. No one knew what to say. "What are you going to do, Chester?" asked Harry Cat finally. "I'm going back there," said Chester. "If the Bellinis find me gone, they'll think I set the fire and I ran." "Well, what makes you think they won't think that you set the fire and stayed?" said Tucker. "I'll have to take that chance," said Chester. Before the cat or the mouse could say anything to stop him, he had hopped over to the newsstand. Paul had told the engineer that he would miss a few runs on the shuttle while he was waiting for the Bellinis. He didn't want anyone monkeying around with the cash register while the cover was off. The conductor thought that the cups and bags from the animals' party had been left by Mario or Papa or someone. While he was taking them over to the trash barrel, Chester jumped up onto the shelf. Nothing there had been burned, but there was a smoky smell to everything. The cricket took the downhearted leap into the cage and settled himself in for whatever might come. It didn't take the Bellinis long to arrive. They had taken a taxi. Now, when the Bellinis took a taxi, you can be sure it was an emergency. Chester could hear them hurrying down the steps from the street, and Papa was trying to soothe Mama, who was wheezing heavily from the asthma and the excitement. And when she saw the heaps of scorched magazines in the newspapers, She began to moan and to shake her head. Papa eased her down onto the stool, but it was still covered with water. She stood right back up again with a wet spot on her skirt. "Ruined," she said. "We're ruined." She sobbed and sobbed. "Everything's burned." Papa comforted her as best he could by saying that it was only a few stacks of the Ladies' Home Journal that had been lost, but Mama wouldn't believe that anything less than complete destruction had come to them all. Mario, who brought up the rear of this parade, thought first for the safety of his cricket. He saw that Chester was in his cage, though, and decided that it would be best just to keep quiet until Mama's outburst of grief had subsided. Paul told him what had happened and how he smelled smoke and heard the alarm clock ringing. Then he came to the part about the animals who had escaped from the burning newsstand. "So," said Mama Bellini, all her despair changing into anger. "Animals in the newsstand again. Didn't I tell you?" She lifted her forefinger at Mario and pointed it straight at him. "Didn't I say that the cricketer would ask his pals? He probably set the fire. He's a firebug." Mario didn't have a chance to speak. He would open his mouth to defend Chester, but before he could say anything, the words were drowned out by Mama's flood of reproaches. She had found someone on whom to blame the unhappiness, and there was no stopping her. When a pause finally came, Mario said meekly, "My cricket would never do anything like burn up our newsstand." "The fact remains," said Mama, "we had a fire." "But crickets are good luck," Mario began. "Good luck," said Mama indignantly. "He eats money. He commits arson. He's a jinx. That's what he is. He is good luck going backwards. And he's got to go." She folded her arms across her chest. It was an attitude that Mario knew meant only absolute end of everything. "I could keep him someone else," the boy offered. "No," said Mama, shaking her head as firmly as a door being closed. "He's a jinx. Out he goes." Papa put his fingers to his lips to signal that Mario shouldn't say anything more, and the two of them began to clean up. They carted away all the hopelessly burned magazines and tried to salvage some of what had been scorched. Mario mopped up the floor of the newsstand while Mama spread out papers to dry. By the time they were finished, it was almost the hour for the first wave of commuters. Chester was lying on the floor of the cricket cage. He felt guilty because, even if he hadn't said it, in a way, the fire was his fault. If he hadn't invited everyone to the newsstand, it wouldn't have happened. It was his playing the rumba that had made Tucker Mouse want to dance so much. And when he was dancing, he tripped over the matches, and, well, he did eat the $2 bill. He began to believe maybe he really was a jinx. During the early morning rush hour, Mario was especially eager to shout, "Paper, mister, paper! Time or life, mister!" Papa was more active than usual, too, but Mama sat glumly on the stool with a gray, determined look on her face. Despite the fact that the selling that morning went very well, she wouldn't change her mind. After the rush was over, Papa went out to buy a new lock. Chester heard a soft scratching from behind the Kleenex box. A familiar face peeked out. "What's going on?" whispered Tucker Mouse. "Are you crazy?" said Chester under his breath. "All they need is to catch you here." "I had to find out how you were doing," said Tucker. "They're going to throw me out," sighed Chester. "Oh, no. Oh, no." Tucker groaned. "And it was me that did it. Supposing I give you the rest of my life savings, maybe we could buy them off." Chester leaned his black little head up against the bars of the cricket cage. "Not this time," he said. "Mama's got her mind made up, and I don't blame her either. I wish I'd never come to New York." "Oh, Chester," wailed Tucker Mouse, "don't say that. You'll make me feel like a rat, and I'm only a mouse." "It's not your fault, Tucker," said Chester, "but I've been nothing but bad luck to them since I came here." Without even knowing what he was doing, the cricket began to chirp to ease his feelings. He found that it helped somehow if you sang your sadness. He wasn't paying much attention to what he was playing. Just by accident, he played the first few notes from the Italian folk song that he had heard the night before on the radio. It was so melancholy and yet so sweet. It fitted his mood perfectly. Mama Bellini was untying a bundle of Herald Tribunes when she heard the chirping. At first, she didn't know what it was. Ci costa questa, she said in Italian, which means, what is that? Chester stopped playing. Ci cantava? Said Mama, who was singing. Mario looked at his mother. Usually when she spoke in Italian, it meant she was in a good mood. But that couldn't be true today, could it? Now Tucker Mouse was a very good judge of character, both animals and human, and he thought he heard a kind of softness in Mama Bellini's voice. Play some more, he whispered to Chester. She hates me, said Chester. It'll only make her more angry. Do like I tell you, commanded the mouse urgently. So Chester started to chirp again. He was in such disgrace anyway. What difference could it make? The piece he was playing was called Come Back to Sorrento, and by the greatest good luck, it happened to be Mama Bellini's favorite song. Back in Naples, Italy, when Papa was courting her before they came to America, he used to come beneath her window on a moonlit night and sing this ballad to the plunking of an old guitar. As the cricket chirped, the whole scene came back to Mama, the still warm night. The moon shining down on the velvety bay of Naples and Papa singing to her. Tears welled up in her eyes as she thought of the bygone times. Very softly she began to murmur along the words of the song. Here's Mama Bellini getting all melancholy, and Chester the cricket is playing back in the cage. Chester Cricket had never played with so much skill before. When he heard Mama singing, he slowed his tempo so she could keep up without straining. When she was loud, he was loud too. And when softer when she got all choked up with emotion and her voice dwindled. But always his chirping carried her along, keeping her on the right beat and the right tune, and he was the perfect accompanist. Mario was dumbfounded. He stared astonished at the cricket cage and then at his mother. It was just as marvelous for his mother to be singing as it was for a cricket to be chirping familiar songs. Sometimes, when she was very happy, Mama Bellini whistled, and once or twice Mario had heard her hum. But now, here she was, crying and warbling like an Italian nightingale. Chester finished Come Back to Sorrento. Keep it up, squeaked Tucker Mouse. She's a sucker for sad songs. Before Mama's mood had a chance to change or wear off, Chester began chirping the selections from the opera that he had played during the party. Mama didn't know the words to the opera, but she hummed along some of the tunes with him. Mario was still as a stone. Papa Bellini came back from the locksmith's. Coming down the stairs, he was surprised not to hear his wife and Mario calling out the newspapers for sale, but when he got to the newsstand, he was even more surprised to hear the strains of the Grand March from Adia coming from the cricket cage. He chirps opera, exclaimed Papa. His eyes looked as big and as startled as two hard-boiled eggs. Shh, said Mama with a wave of her hand. Chester's memory for music was perfect. He only had to hear a piece once to remember it forever, and when he had finished all the opera numbers, he stopped. Should I go on with the pop tunes? He whispered to Tucker Mouse, who was still hidden behind the Kleenex box. Wait a while, said Tucker. See what happens. Mama Bellini had a dreamy look in her eyes. She put her arm around her son and she said, Mario, no cricketer who sings Torna Sorrento so beautifully could possibly set a fire. He could stay a little while longer. Mario threw his arms around his mother's neck. You hear? You hear? Squeaked Tucker Mouse. You can stay. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. This is only the beginning. I'll be your manager, okay? Okay? Okay, said Chester. And so began the most remarkable week in Chester Cricket's, or any cricket's, life. Well, that's the end of chapter 11, and we'll start with chapter 12 next time. And I hope this all gets recorded and so that you can watch it all. We love you, kids. Remember, tomorrow is Easter, And I hope that you get up and worship the Lord with your family, and try to do the best you can to honor Jesus with your life. Bye.